Have you ever wondered how the same God can be described as the stern commander of wars in the Old Testament and, at the same time, as the compassionate Father of love and forgiveness in the New Testament? But what if this duality isn't just a matter of perspective? What if we're dealing with something much greater, something deliberately hidden for centuries? In this video, you'll uncover what might lie behind this apparent contradiction and discover how forgotten texts, like the Gospel of Thomas, offer new perspectives that challenge everything we thought we knew about the divine. Get ready for a reflection that could transform how you see God and yourself. Since the dawn of humanity, the concept of divinity has always been surrounded by mystery. Among the many beliefs and traditions, one question remains: who is God? When examining the Bible, an intriguing duality emerges. On one side, Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, known for his severity and judgment. On the other, the God revealed through Jesus in the New Testament, who brings love, forgiveness, and grace. These descriptions seem contradictory, don't they? But what if this duality isn't just a matter of interpretation? This question has fueled centuries of theological debate. How can the same Yahweh, who delivered harsh judgment, also be the Father who sent his Son to save humanity? Perhaps it's time to go beyond traditional explanations. Simply accepting narratives without questioning them is not enough. We need to understand whether we truly know the divine nature or if we're confined to perspectives shaped over time. Among the theories that attempt to explain this issue, the Gnostics offer a bold perspective: Yahweh and the God of the New Testament are different entities. To them, Yahweh is a lesser God, limited and imperfect, while the God revealed through Jesus represents a pure and superior divine essence. This theory, as controversial as it may seem, challenges what we've been taught as absolute. And if it's true, what does it mean for our spiritual connection? This duality isn't unfamiliar to us as humans. Aren't we often both loving and punitive, compassionate and rigid? Perhaps this divine duality isn't a flaw but a reflection of the complexity of existence. Are we ready to question our deeply rooted beliefs and go beyond what we've been taught about the divine? The theory of two gods challenges us to go beyond what we've been taught. In the ancient world, religious and philosophical currents competed to explain existence, and the Gnostics introduced a radical idea: what if Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, was merely a lesser God? To them, Yahweh was limited, marked by human flaws, while the God of the New Testament represented a superior and perfect force, the true divine essence. This theory isn't just a controversial idea, it directly challenges our spiritual understanding. Do the differences between Yahweh and the God of Jesus reflect merely distinct interpretations, or are we dealing with separate entities? For the Gnostics, Yahweh was authoritarian and controlling, while the God of Jesus embodied spiritual freedom and unconditional love. How can such contrasting figures coexist within the same sacred text? Accepting the theory of two gods requires the courage to question what we've been taught as absolute. Why do Yahweh and the God of the New Testament appear so different? Do these differences reflect an evolution in humanity's understanding of the divine, or are they the result of historical manipulations? Moreover, this theory prompts us to reevaluate our relationship with God. If Yahweh is a lesser God, what does that say about power and authority? And if the God of the New Testament represents divine perfection, how can we deepen our connection with him? These questions go beyond theory, they touch the core of our spiritual journey. In the year 325 after Christ, the Council of Nicaea forever changed Christianity. Under the leadership of Emperor Constantine, religious leaders gathered to standardize the faith. At first glance, this event seemed to promote unity, but Constantine's political intentions soon became evident. Christianity, once persecuted, became a strategic tool to strengthen imperial control. A faith that was once diverse and rich in interpretations was molded into a single narrative aligned with the interests of power. This historical moment shows how religion, a spiritual connection, can be used as a tool of control. Sacred texts were revised, alternative interpretations dismissed, and ideas deemed dangerous were excluded. Among those most affected were the Gnostics, who offered perspectives that challenged centralized authority. To them, the Council of Nicaea was not about reflecting divine truth but about consolidating political dominance. Ordinary people, who sought God in varied ways, faced the imposition of a single path. Many voices were silenced, and texts like the Gospel of Thomas, which promoted a direct connection to God, were excluded. Why? Because this message challenged the need for intermediaries, threatening the centralized structure of the Church. This exclusion shaped not only the history of Christianity but also limited our understanding of God. Texts that could have enriched our spirituality were labeled as heretical. How many ideas were buried along with them? How many truths remain out of our reach? However, recognizing these omissions does not mean rejecting faith but re-examining it. Questioning what we've been taught doesn't weaken our spirituality, it can actually strengthen it. God cannot be confined by human boundaries, and these questions invite us to think beyond what has been imposed on us. When we think of the Bible as the divine word, we often forget that it didn't appear fully formed. Its composition was the result of centuries of human decisions, intense debates, and choices that defined which texts would be included or excluded. Among the excluded texts, the Gospel of Thomas stands out as one of the most intriguing. Discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls, it presents a Jesus who teaches introspection and a direct connection with God, challenging the need for intermediaries. Why would a text with such powerful messages be left out? The Gospel of Thomas proposes that the kingdom of God resides within each of us, accessible through personal reflection. This idea threatened the centralized structure of the Church, especially during the Council of Nicaea, where Christianity was shaped to serve as a political tool. Messages that encouraged spiritual freedom were labeled heretical and excluded from the official canon. This exclusion wasn't accidental. It was a strategy to consolidate power. Texts like the Gospel of Thomas, which promoted a direct connection with the divine, were seen as threats to centralized authority. But the impact went further, it limited our own understanding of God. How many truths were buried along with those texts? Re-evaluating these choices doesn't mean rejecting faith, but questioning the narratives imposed on us. God cannot be confined by human boundaries. Texts like the Gospel of Thomas remind us that the divine is accessible to all who genuinely seek it. Are we ready to revisit these ideas and make room for a more authentic spirituality? Among the names that evoke both curiosity and fear, Lucifer holds a unique place. Traditionally described as God's adversary, he is associated with rebellion and evil. But what if Lucifer is more than we've been taught? At the root of his name lies an intriguing meaning, bearer of light. For the Gnostics, this light symbolizes freedom and knowledge, and Lucifer is not seen as an absolute antagonist but as a figure who challenges power and invites reflection on authority. To understand this perspective, we must revisit the myth of the fall. Lucifer, an angel created by God, is said to have defied divine order, refusing to submit. For the Gnostics, this rebellion was not an act of evil but a quest for truth and freedom. They believe that by challenging Yahweh, Lucifer exposed the limitations of a lesser god who sought control rather than inspiration. This interpretation does not reject spirituality but broadens our understanding, emphasizing the importance of free will. This alternative view challenges the traditional narrative, where Lucifer is merely the adversary. Reframing him as a symbol of light and knowledge invites us to reflect on our own search for answers. How often do we accept what we've been taught without questioning it? And what if some of these answers are not tests of faith but invitations to expand our spiritual perspective? This reflection, however, is not a call to rebellion but to introspection. Just as Lucifer is portrayed as the bearer of light, we too are called to seek that light within ourselves, not to defy God but to understand His true essence. Perhaps the greatest divine gift is the ability to think and grow spiritually, breaking through the limitations imposed by human traditions. This view requires courage, as questioning old narratives can bring resistance. But the reward is clear, a deeper and more authentic connection with God, rooted in understanding and love rather than fear or imposition. After all, true divine light does not divide, it unites. When we think of God, we often limit ourselves to human definitions: a king, a judge, a father. But do these images truly capture the full essence of the divine? For many theologians and thinkers, God cannot be confined to forms or words. He is a presence in everything, accessible through introspection and spiritual connection. This perspective does not reject traditional narratives, it expands them, suggesting a God who transcends books and religious structures. This idea challenges us to look inward rather than seeking answers solely in the external world. If God is an omnipresent force, then every act of kindness, every moment of love, and even silence can become a direct connection to Him. This does not mean abandoning biblical teachings, but using them as a starting point for something greater. After all, what does it truly mean to walk with God? This question requires courage to ask, and even more to answer. Throughout history, many spiritual traditions have emphasized the need to seek God within oneself. This practice has often been suppressed by religious systems that centralized power and interpretations. However, introspection is not an act of rebellion but of humility. It is the recognition that, despite our human limitations, we have the capacity to connect with something eternal and transformative. This redefines our relationship with God, not as a distant being, but as a constant and accessible presence. This connection also leads us to question the divisions created by human narratives. If God is in everything, how can there be boundaries between the sacred and the profane? And if these divisions merely reflect our fears and insecurities, then confronting these questions challenges us to let go of old certainties and embrace a more authentic spirituality, rooted in experience and freedom of thought. The reward for this search is transformative. By understanding that God cannot be confined by human definitions, we discover a renewed sense of purpose and belonging. We don't need definitive answers to every mystery, because the very act of seeking already draws us closer to the divine. This is the true reward, a living faith that welcomes doubts as an essential part of the spiritual journey. What about you? Do you believe that God has two faces, or is it us who shape His image according to our beliefs? Share your opinion in the comments. If this video sparked new reflections for you, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share it with someone else who is seeking answers. See you in the next video.